Y'all ready for this?
Yeah, but where is it? Why can't I find it? Welcome to the HACKADAY podcast. I'm Elliot Williams.
And I'm Kristina Panos.
This is episode 237. We'll be talking about dancing raisins, coding on apples, and a salad spinner mouse. This week we have a little bit of HACKADAY news. We started up the Halloween Hackfest. So if you have any Halloween-themed hacks, bring them on. And we mean anything. Costumes, pumpkins, home decor, spooky whatevers, even fun kid things. Whatever it is. If it makes somebody happy for Halloween, we want to see it.
Well, that's nice and broad. That's nice of us.
Well, it's Halloween, right? Like, it's your chance to embed proximity sensors in things that don't need them to scare people. Like, what's wrong with that?
It's kind of a nice, follow-up / extension to the wild card round in a way.
Yeah, right? I was looking, I actually remembered, it was like a game, it was a projected game of, jump on the ghosts. And they had an overhead computer vision thing. And It was meant for kids, and they were supposed to, jump on these projected ghosts on the ground. And it looked really, really cool. And that's the sort of thing that, that's one that I think I'm going to have to look into again. But I couldn't find the link. I'll dig harder, and I'll put the link for y'all in the show notes. What's your favorite Halloween?
Oh, geez.
Haunt, hack, costume?
I've seen some really cool candy dispensers in my time.
Yeah?
I've got one in mind, but I can't remember exactly what it was. It was really cool, though. I'll have to look through my posts or something to figure out what it was. You'd think I would remember something about it, other than that it was round. I think it was like a giant pumpkin. I'm not sure. Yeah. Spherical. It's from a couple years ago.
See if you can find it. We made this thing. It was a total failure. You have to do, you wouldn't think that you have to do user experience testing for Halloween, but it turns out you do. It's a ghost-shaped thing, right? I just cut a big piece of cardboard, glued some white paper to it, and some black for the eyes and the mouth. But I cut a hole in the mouth so that you could, stick your hand through the ghost's mouth and get the candy from inside the ghost's mouth. And I thought it was perfectly obvious. But if you watch kids come up to it, they're like, there's a ghost here. What am I going to do? And then they look around behind it and they see the bowl and they just take the candy and walk away.
Oh.
And I'm like, it's the mouth. You're supposed to put your hand through the mouth. And no. Never works. So I have to improve my Halloweenery for this year, actually. That's on my to-do list.
We don't get too many people, and we have a cat that we have to keep from running outside.
Oh, right.
So we just kind of put a bowl out at this point.
Fair enough.
And leave the light on.
Halloween's not really a German holiday, and about maybe half the houses in our neighborhood do Halloween, and the others just don't at all. And so it's really fun for the kids to ring on people's doors, and it's especially the older generation. So it's some old grandma opens the door and they're like, trick or treat, and she's like, what are you talking about?
Oh.
It's super. And then she goes and gets some pralines or something, and she's like, here, I hope they don't have rum in them.
Some 20-year-old ribbon candy or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have some licorice. Licorice all sorts.
It's hit or miss around here, but we try to represent it.
Good. Lead the charge.
Yeah. You got to do a little Halloween. You people out there, don't be me. Do not start thinking about Halloween on the 30th. You've got, because the contest ends on the 31st, and you have to document it before then. So get over to HACKADAY.io now and start working on your hack. You could start the project up before you finish. Start logging it along the way. You'll get a nice long build log there. Oh, we like to see that. Have I said anything about prizes? No. DigiKey and Arduino are both pairing up for prizes. So in addition to the usual $150 gift certificates from DigiKey, we've also got some Arduino Pro swag added into the mix. And, I think it wouldn't hurt your chances in judging if you used some Arduino stuff in your project, but you, by all means, don't have to.
One Arduino begets another,
Exactly.
potentially.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you get to keep it, right? You get to keep your entry into the contest too. We don't take it from you. We just take pictures.
Yeah.
Leave only footprints.
We just take its soul.
Exactly. Shall we head on off to What's That Sound?
Okay, here we go.
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
Give it a listen.
Okay, let me turn down first.
Yeah, careful, it might be loud.
Oh, that part sounds familiar.
Yeah? Do you know what it is? Do you know what it is?
No.
Do you want a hint?
Sure.
Dan picked it.
Oh, so it's a medical device?
Getting
Or-
warmer.
So it's not a ham radio device.
It is not a ham radio device, no.
It's just one machine?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it makes a crazy range of different noises, doesn't it?
I have some weird guesses.
I'll take them.
I don't know why, because I don't think they make that many sounds except the like staple gun sound, but like I thought maybe it was a defibrillator warm-up sound or something. But no, that's probably not it. And then I thought life-preserving machine, but I don't think there's just one of those.
Right.
Life support machine.
Oh, right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't know.
It is an MRI machine.
Oh, that's why I've had one. That's why it sounds familiar.
I never have, so I don't recognize it personally. Like I said, this is one that Dan picked, and he's like, "Oh, you know what makes a horrible, frightful noise? An MRI." And so I went and got one, and I played it for him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's the stuff." So we got 22 answers in. Of them, 12 are correct, so pretty good.
Nice.
The best wrong answers include dot matrix printer, nuclear launching round, nuclear launching rings. I also love that two other people noticed that I was having GSM interference in that show and mentioned that it wasn't the GSM interference off of my phone. Thanks a lot. Really, thanks a lot. But a whole ton of people said it's an MRI. It's an MRI. Some of them with exclamation points. So you have been in MRI machines. Dan says they're horribly claustrophobic, and when they start making louder and escalatier noises, they get terrifying.
Well, it was just my like foot, my lower leg, so
Oh, that's not bad.
no.
Yeah, I think you have to be like all of you has to be in the tunnel for it to get really, really creepy.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I'm immune to them. I actually broke my arm and have a steel plate holding my left humerus together.
Oh my.
And yeah, it means I can't get within like 100 feet of one without getting slurped through the air and pulled into it. You know, take off your wedding rings and me before you turn the MRI machine on. I have no idea what would happen, but it, might be fun. I guess I should walk by the MRI ward sometime and see if I can like feel my arm tingling or something.
Yikes.
Yikes! I gotta pick a winner. Let's roll a 12-sided die. I'm gonna go to... There's got to be some kind of internet dice roller. Here we go. Rolladie.net. We need one 12-sided die. Drum roll, please. The number is 10. And number 10 is... David Smith. Is it an MRI machine? Question mark. Short answer, yes. Congratulations, David. We'll be getting a Hackaday podcast t-shirt out to you. And by popular request, a few weeks back, FedEx suggested on the Discord the Enigma machine recordings. He sent them in. Nobody got them. So Tom thought it would be fair to give FedEx the t-shirt because, he proposed the sound that stumped everyone. What do you think? Is that fair?
Sure.
What the heck? So 2 winners this week. FedEx for sending us in a sound a couple weeks ago, and David Smith for getting the MRI. And if you want yourself a Hackaday podcast t-shirt, there's one and only one way to get them. And that is to listen in next week, guess at what the sound is, and get lucky when the dice are rolling 2 weeks from now. So stay tuned. My first hack this week is, well, it's kind of an article. Normal users don't code on their Mac, but Apple keeps trying. This is a really neat rundown by the Eclectic Light Company of all of Macintosh's attempts to make scripting languages easy enough that normal people will use them. And I think this is like such a noble cause in a way, because one of the great side effects of knowing how to work with computers is that you can get them to do stuff for you. And it is striking, and Jenny mentions this in her write-up here, how many people just kind of use computers for what they are and what they're given. And, you do some word processing, you do some web browsing. And this article lists a bunch of the ways Apple has tried to bring coding to every man. And it starts with HyperTalk and the HyperCard thing, which is way, way back, and then brings up AppleScript, which actually I'm not an Apple guy. I didn't know about, but it looks pretty interesting. It's kind of a, English language equivalent programming language, but it looks like it's actually pretty deep. Prograph was a flow programming language, kind of like LabVIEW or GNU Radio, any of those other ones where you pull lines between units and, say if this happens, then that. It actually looks really cool. This is from way back in 1989. Their kind of modern ones include Automator, Swift Playgrounds, and Shortcuts, which is kind of their current contender. And Shortcuts looks like it's kind of a cross between if this then that and maybe like Scratch or one of those other programming languages where you can kind of pull a block over and say do this, do this, do this. It's kind of one of these moderny no code, low code kind of programming language ideas. So you can say select folders and get the files that are made more recently than this and then move them to this folder, so you can like automatically archive files or something like that and just have it run all the time. And that sort of thing, again, it's the sort of thing that, like, if you're a Linux nerd, it's like trivially simple to do. But for people who don't write their own code, don't script stuff a lot, it's actually tremendously, tremendously useful. So kudos to Mac for hammering down on this and continuing to try. I do have to wonder why there's this like long list of kind of, I'm going to say it, failed attempts at convincing people to program. Is it just that people don't want to? I don't know.
Probably.
Probably, huh?
Yeah. Or they don't, they can't think of any use cases.
Yeah, right?
Which has been my problem.
Don't you ever run into that situation where you're like, I need to move all the CSV files out of this folder and into another one. And so then you're like, click, 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 drag.
I mean, I'd select all and drag, but no.
Yeah, but imagine they're interwoven with other file types, right? And like you have to like go through each one of them and
We can organize them by file type.
oh yeah, you could organize by file type. Okay, good. Yeah, fair enough.
Click the top one, hit shift, click the bottom one.
Fair enough.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right. Maybe that's why. And then maybe that is why these things fail. Maybe the failure of AppleScript is because Apple provides you enough ways to do this in their operating system that you just don't need it anyway.
I think you have to want to, at least a little bit, be interested in typing like in a terminal.
Yeah.
Or just, creating with typing at all, other than a Word document or a document of some kind.
Maybe it is also the case that the hard part of learning the scripting language isn't the typing anyway. It's kind of learning the concepts. And maybe it doesn't help to make them, bubbly, friendly, or connect them with lines or any of that. Maybe it really is just that it's people don't want to think about the problem or something. I don't know. Can't it just happen? Why do I have to think about it? There's also a ton of comments on this one from people who thought that this little weird scripting language or that one had a particular advantage. I think that's actually really interesting to read too, because there is kind of a long history of people having good and crazy and interesting ideas about how to organize programming. And, this is kind of a particular cross-section of it. It's the Apple flavor cross-section of it, but still worth reading.
My first hack is the science behind the majesty of dancing raisins.
The majesty.
The majesty. So, the science behind dancing raisins, apparently there is some. Saverio Spinoli and his daughter were playing around in the kitchen, and they discovered that raisins will dance and tumble in soda water. So they decided to investigate further, and wrote up a paper. Why does this happen? It's all about the bubbles. They attach themselves to the wrinkly folds of the raisins and make them more buoyant, which makes them sort of act like a lava lamp, in that the raisins float up, they lose bubbles along the way, they hit the surface, they lose bubbles. start to go back downward where the new bubbles latch on. And what's really cool is Severio and the other couple of researchers use 3D printed models to really look at the bubbles and the forces at play. And they found out that this phenomenon can go on for up to 2 hours, though most of the activity happens in the first 20 minutes.
Oh my
I thought
God.
that was pretty cool. Yeah. Until the soda goes flat, basically.
Right.
Well, or mostly flat.
Right. Oh, I'm going to have to download this paper now. That's crazy. What were they 3D printing?
Spheres, basically, with, I assume, different surface,
With more or less
different topologies.
bubbly folds. Yeah, right?
Oh, and it also works with peanuts and beer.
They're not so wrinkly, right? So
Yeah.
It must
Maybe
be
it's the
that.
salt.
That's fantastic. I could totally imagine the kid being like, I want to make raisin juice. And just throwing a bunch of raisins in there. And that's how this started. The first comment, when I was young, we used mothballs instead of raisins. What? You could kill yourself. What are you even talking about? Anyway, whatever. My next hack, nitinol is a material we need to be playing with more, is a neat write-up by Bob Badley of, I mean, frankly, I think it's kind of a goofy idea. Yeah, I think worse, I think it's a goofy Kickstarter. So who knows? The Kickstarter in question is to put nitinol wire inside a rubber tube so that you can have an airless bike tire. And that's kind of fun. And what's really neat about this is that the specific properties of nitinol is what makes it plausible as a bike tire substitute. But really, nitinol just has so many crazy, awesome properties that you want to be messing around with it. And that was kind of Bob's point here in writing the article, was that there's just so much fun you can have with this stuff. And I'll actually link to a really great explainer video about why nitinol does what it does by Bill Hammack, the engineer guy. But what it does is it's super elastic, and that means you can bend it, and then it springs back to its original shape. And what's really wild about it is that it does that at low temperatures, and then if you, at a low enough temperature, you can bend it and it'll stay bent. And then if you heat it back up, it'll go back to its original shape. That original shape is the shape it was set at when it was at its highest temperature. So you heat it up into a shape like a spring or a coil or whatever you want at 500 degrees C, and then let it cool down, and it really wants to retain that shape. It's got a fun lattice structure on the inside that really wants to hold that shape. You can deform it, and it'll either go straight back to that spring shape, or if you've deformed it enough that it stretches out, it'll go back to that same shape when it gets hot. And that's really cool too. So it's got these two kind of, I don't know, I mean, we've seen it used as muscle wire, so you can make springs that then, when you heat them up, want to pull back in. But you can also just use it for its incredible super elastic properties. And that's what they make heart stents out of them, because you don't want, you know how when you bend metal back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it eventually fatigues and goes snap, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you don't want to happen with a stent that's holding some of your arteries open.
Right.
Right. So that's why they make them out of nitinol. It's kind of like a super metal. It's unfortunately priced accordingly as well, which makes me think that these bike tires on the Kickstarter must be like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for bike tires. And I don't see myself paying that, but they look pretty rad. I think instead you'd be better off just buying yourself a medium small sample of nitinol and playing with it, because it really does look like a lot of fun.
Or, rip some out of a hairdryer or a toaster.
That's not nitinol, is it? That's
Thought it was.
No, that's heating element thing. Oh, what is that though? Maybe it is?
Nichrome.
Nichrome, thank you.
Huh.
That's nichrome. That's different. Whew. Which is also fun. I mean, that's good for making stuff brutally hot.
A hot wire foam cutter.
Did you say thumb cutter or foam cutter?
Foam.
Because I just had this really bad feeling. Yeah. Yeah.
Thumb cauterizer.
Yeah. How? I've been using regular stainless steel wire, piano wire, as my foam cutter these days, in case you want to know.
I'll keep that in mind.
But piano wire breaks. And nitinol doesn't break because it's super elastic.
How elastic is it?
It's super elastic.
My next hack is kinetic sculpture intermittently lights up the night. Now this comes from Iric, and this thing, I just think it's beautiful. But some people don't care for the enhanced audio. That's understandable. More on that in a second. So this here is feature creep. This is the definition of feature creep. Iric just wanted to test out a new CNC with something simple, but, quote, things escalated out of control and turned into a motor-driven sculpture. It's driven by an Arduino Nano Every, and it has a total of 8 custom gears with various cog counts. But the neatest part to me is the intermittent part, and that comes from LEDs that skate along these custom slip rings for power, but the power isn't always continuous, so the blinking lights blink. And back to the sound, there's a piezo that amplifies all the acrylic on acrylic sounds and those of the motor. But like I said, some people don't care for that. I think it's kind of interesting.
I like the idea of like imperfect slip rings on a bunch of gears to make kind of a, periodic / long random looking pattern. That's really crazy. That's a fun idea. Because normally you want your slip rings to work all the time. Right? Like slip rings with loose connections. That's usually something to be avoided. But here it actually is part of the deal. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I hear you about the sound. It sounds like at first it sounds a little bit like a marble drop or something, but then there's this like creepy, particularly acrylic creaking noise in there. I could see how some people would object to that. I'm not sure I'd have the volume up on full.
I could see how people would, how the acrylic on acrylic might make people's brains hurt a little bit in the nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah, if you're one of those chalkboard people, that has to be no good. And my next hack coming from Bloop Museum, preserving floppy disks. Boy, that is a sleeper of a title. This is a great story about how Bloop Museum found some critical evidence from ancient court records on a 40-year-old plus floppy drive written by a PDP-11, and they were encoded in this weird stenography format. More on that in a minute. But the point is that by pulling this data off of these old floppy disks, they actually managed to exonerate a man who had been in prison for 18 years. So this isn't even just a really awesome hack. This is an amazing story, and you really should go over to the Bloop Museum blog and check it out, because it's, in addition to being hyper nerdy, it's also very heartwarming. So really, really check it out. But back to the nerding. So I guess some of the local police had heard about their collection of old retro computers and attempts to restore them and said, you know what, we've got this floppy that we really need to get the data on. We'll take it over there. And of course, our hero from Bloop Museum has not just the right floppy drive to put it in and try to read it, but when that fails, because 40-year-old floppy drive, he pulls out his Grease Weasel. And Grease Weasel is, it's an open source hardware and software project that you can put in between an old school floppy drive and your computer, and it reads kind of more raw data out of it than the computer would give you. And this gives you a better chance at salvaging whatever's on there. I love that he gives a shout out to a hack from back in 2021. I'll throw the links in the show notes about reading floppy drives with an oscilloscope. Because when Grease Weasel fails you, the oscilloscope may actually save your bacon. And all of this is kind of just a reminder that these magnetic transitions on the floppy drive, when you put them next to a read head, they give you these very analog voltages. And when they get quiet, sometimes the circuitry in the floppy drive has a hard time reading it, but you, with some clever data massaging, can get the data back out. And that's basically what the story is here. But once you get the data, of course, that's only half the battle. Then you have to realize what all the ones and zeros mean. And that part's really interesting. There's a recurring pattern in the data that he looks up and discovers is the signature of a binary format used by a stenographer's typewriter. And so he's got this weird proprietary court reporter stenography data format to deal with. And that's pretty fun. Reaches out to the Plover community, which is an open source stenography group. Ooh, I'll have to throw some links to the Plovers in the show notes too. That's really awesome. And they're able to help him, and they actually end up decoding the court transcriptions, and that gets the guy out of jail. Really awesome article, but also really great hacking and super community effort. Like, there's retro computer people, there's DIY stenography enthusiasts. It is the weirdest nexus of nerdery, and it comes together and gets the job done. And I just love that.
My next hack comes from JGJ Matt. It's time you built a smart pocket watch. Now, I think this is just beautiful. Do you think it's beautiful?
Yes.
I mean, for what is essentially a cheap smartwatch stuffed into a pocket watch, it came out really well. Now, among the harder parts are that JGJ Matt had to design and print a bracket that holds the guts just right, but he also wanted to figure out a way to power it without adding any new holes into the case. So this is the really cool part. He made a charging port out of the top where the latch goes and printed like a little connector with a pin in it for the positive, and I believe it connects to the case for ground. But yeah, that part just blew me away. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's an awesome looking little nubbin.
I had to put that in there.
I love the way the glass lens over the top of the flat round LCD screen looks.
Yes.
Like that just looks cool.
I just want to polish it on my shirt. I want one. I don't know if I could make one, but I want one. I'd take just a plain pocket watch too. I used to have one, but I cheaped out on it instead of getting like an antique one or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just got like a cheap modern one
that actually works and tells the time and stuff.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's my problem with pocket watches is that things in my pockets tend to get broken or scratched, or my keys beat them up, or...
Yeah, you gotta get one that fits in that little fifth pocket of your jeans or something.
Yeah, exactly. Wait a minute, I'm looking at the actual project now. It's literally a smartwatch that's just kind of wedged in there. That's fantastic. Oh, it doesn't even use a round LCD screen. It uses a square one. Oh, that's really... That is actually a really sweet illusion. There's a square LCD and then a black background around it, a black mask around the outside of it. And when you put the glass over it, you really can't tell.
Oh, heck, I didn't notice that.
Too many details for me here. I'm going to get lost looking at it, and I would never be able to recreate it. My first quick hack this week comes from Tom Tilley. Salad spinner busts some new moves. This is one of those put an upside down mouse in something and use it as a controller hacks. This time it's with the top of a salad spinner. Really like that, and it must be a really fantastically intuitive controller for playing Bust a Move. Coming up next, Marb's Lab replicating Faraday's 200-year-old electric motor. And this is one of the first electric motors, also one of the craziest. The original used mercury as a conductor, and it made an electric field, which made a magnetic field, which made it spin. This one uses instead a pleasanter, I guess, fluid to conduct the electricity, but it also ends up etching and eating the electrodes slowly. I guess you have to take your pick, pool of mercury or caustic solution on this one. Inazuma Denki driving a motor with an audio amp chip. This is fun. He was doing it just because he had it on hand, but discovers that you can use an audio amplifier to drive a motor, because what's it doing? It's just making more current out of less current, and that's what you need to do. You can also drive a speaker with a motor driver, and I've done that, and it sounds pretty horrible. They're not optimized for low crossover distortion, but, in a pinch. And last but not least, Dalibor Farney's enormous Nixies light up contemporary art museum. This is just a beautiful installation. The artist who did it, I can't even remember his name because it features Dalibor Farney's exquisite handmade Nixie tubes and looks absolutely fantastic. I guess I shouldn't short the artist because it actually is pretty conceptually awesome as a piece. And it ends up having simultaneously both a like Matrix from the Matrix vibe to it, coupled with the most exquisite Nixies you've ever seen.
My first quick hack comes from Knee. You know, the nice who say Knee. It is paper punching machine, looks like a cute piece of computer history past. Now, this is a little machine that punches binary into paper tape, just like computers of yore. A stepper feeds the paper tape through the machine, and a series of solenoids driving dies punch holes into the tape as it passes through. Now, we're not sure why this machine exists, other than to be cute and look cool. In fact, someone said the binary looks random, so that's even more puzzling, but it sure is cute. Next up is Paisley Computer's spooky noise box plays war drums. They're simple, but I sure do love noise boxing. This is essentially a bunch of noise-making doodads attached to a resonating chamber. In this case, a cigar box with springs inside for extra reverb. Extra reverb, oh yes, because it gets plugged into an interface and a digital audio workstation. In fact, Paisley Computer does a showdown between a regular effects chain and an interface with a DAW. The effects, I believe, are all very cool, and the rubber bands, I think, produce very nice drum sounds. I like that there are, four different types of drums based on the length of the rubber band. Last up is Time and Tide Are One Thing from Rabbit Creek. Now, maybe this is common knowledge by now, but sea urchins like to cover up, and they will happily reach for a 3D printed hat if they're offered one. So this is a tide clock that uses this principle to tell tidal time. And it uses a TTGo to fetch tidal information and displays it on the screen, as well as controlling a servo that moves the sea urchin around. Now, as the urchin moves around, it dons a new magnetically attracted hat, and then puts the hat back and moves to the next hat. Very cool.
All right, and that brings us to our Can't Miss articles. These are long-form pieces written by our fantastic HACKADAY writing staff. This week I wanted to pick Lewin Day's Rocker Bogey Suspension, the beloved solution to extraplanetary rovers. This was inspired by the recent Indian rover that landed on the moon and also had this kind of rocker bogey six-wheeled layout that all of the US's Mars rovers have had as well. And that got Lewin to thinking, what is up with these? And is this going to be like the end game for extraplanetary rover exploration vehicles? And the answer, maybe. What I didn't realize about them until reading this article, there's this kind of the rocker is on one side, there's one wheel on an arm, and then there's a second arm that goes off of that first arm. And so that can pivot freely, and then the overall rocker can pivot. And so you've got three wheels on a side, and they can all kind of ride up and down independently of each other. What I didn't realize is that the actual action with the rocker bogey is in a differential that goes between the two side rockers. And there's a couple different designs for it. And fortunately, NASA has documented it all for us. So feel free to check it out. But the gimmick with the differential is that when one side lifts up, the other side necessarily falls down. And so this means that it kind of tries to mechanically maintain equal weight on all six of the wheels, giving it essentially maximum traction. And it's a really neat, simple mechanism that's entirely passive, but gets the job done. It's also very specific to like rover designs. I think Lewin points out that there's no suspension here. It's, it rolls up and down over things, but if you were going fast and, you were hitting bumpy terrain, you'd still feel the bumps. So this isn't what you want for like your, speedster vehicle. It's also not super good for carrying heavy weights because there's the rockers are long and they have a pivot in the middle. So there's going to be a lot of torque on those parts. So you have to build them really strong. And it only really makes sense if you have each of the wheels independently steerable and with its own motor. So like really, it really is just kind of this curiosity / whatever rover design that makes it work, but they all function together as a package to make something that gets really good traction over crazily varying surfaces as long as you're going slowly. And that's exactly the mission profile of a Mars rover slash lunar rover slash whatever rover. And that's exactly what gets the job done. You should definitely check out the PDF from NASA here where they tell you all about it. It's a NASA research paper on the rocker bogie suspension. But you should also check out former HACKADAY writer Roger Cheng's Soppy robot and all of his attempts at making an affordable and DIY-able rocker bogie robot construction, and he got really successful with this. And the thing that I thought was coolest about the Soppy project, he thought it was originally because he has, too much play in the legs, or, it's something about it being a model. When he would pick it up, the legs kind of wobble and flop in the breeze in a particularly funny kind of oscillatory way. And I remember when they were landing, might have been Curiosity, on Mars, he actually saw video of the NASA robot doing exactly the same thing when it was coming down off of its sky crane. So it's just part of the design, folks. Don't worry if your rocker bogies are wiggling when you pick your robot up. It's totally normal.
All I can think of is the fact that, have you ever seen a camera stabilized by a chicken's head?
No, but yes.
Okay.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
With an actual camera on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I actually thought it was all about the stabilization, but it turns out it's not. The stabilization of the body isn't actually perfect. There's an animation here that actually for the rocker bogie motion is really super, but it has the body staying dead level. And that actually doesn't happen with practical robots. They actually do wiggle up and down a bit. I mean, it's significantly less than if the legs didn't pivot, of course. But the primary goal isn't to keep the body stable, which I always thought it was. It's just to keep the weight down and all 6 of the wheels on the ground, no matter what it's driving up and over. I learned from reading the HACKADAY article and the NASA paper that it points to.
Why not 8 wheels?
Yeah, right? You could do a second rocker on the other end and do it with 8.
Yeah.
More wheels, more better. I don't know.
More higher toll on the toll road.
Yeah, I don't know why not. More parts to go wrong.
Yeah.
Like NASA really hates putting stuff on things if it can break. Like they really try to put the minimum number of things kind of maximally engineered for maximum reliability, but then just the absolute minimum number of them, because the more things that can go wrong. But for a backyard rover, 8 wheels, I like it.
Are you going to build one?
I am super tempted. Roger actually had a design that was an all 3D printed, like micro Curiosity clone. And I don't think he ever released the plans for that. I'm going to have to get on him about that because that one is so cool looking. Whereas the other one's bigger and frankly, out of my budget. The JPL open source rover got a revamp 5 years after its last one on exactly the day that we went live with this article. Total weird coincidence. And posted up to HACKADAY.io. So you should check that one out. That one is even more industrial strength and consequently costs even more than Roger's. Roger's goal in building Soppy was to make it as cheap as he could. And then he made a micro mini one that is, I believe, even more affordable just by, scaling it down means you don't have to buy as big motors and stuff like that. We'll see. But yeah, it does make me want to build one. I don't know that I have the cash or the time at the moment, but it makes me want to build one. Alrighty, what you got for me?
I chose my own.
Yay!
I chose what is killing cursive? Ballpoints, probably. And first of all, holy wow, we had a lot of comments on this one. But I guess that's what you get with a divisive opening line like that. But they weren't all about that. I made several points in this article about why fountain pens are better than ballpoint pens and came up with a few positives for ballpoint pens. But I think I actually failed to mention just that it's the flexibility. just in the nib of a fountain pen. It flexes. It practically does thin strokes on the upstroke for you and thicker strokes on the downstroke without you even trying. And not only does that look pretty, I believe it's easier to read because, well, for one thing, words have shapes. Like, there's a reason that all caps is hard to read is because words have shapes with their ascenders and descenders. And I think that carries over to handwriting with the thick strokes and the thin strokes.
But what's your beef with the ballpoint?
Well, they're so rigid and the ink is so thick and it doesn't lay down evenly ever. And sometimes they're hard to start. Sometimes they just skip. They're not that great, but they do store pretty well. They're very portable. You can get retractable. Now you can get a retractable fountain pen if you have enough money, but they're not that popular. But retractability is pretty cool, I think, in a writing instrument. But they usually have no grip either. You know, they're just round.
Or hexagonal.
Do you remember the old like 6-sided Bic pens?
I was gonna say, or hexagonal.
You couldn't refill them. Yeah, I don't think they make too many hexagonal pens anymore, do they? I guess they don't use that many ballpoints.
I do think there's something to be said for that. I mean, the Germans are fanatics about it. Children in school here only write with fountain pens. And the claim is exactly what you're saying. It's that helps them learn to write nicely by giving them a feel for it and by, flowing easily and all the above. And, maybe it's true. Maybe it is true that if you push down too hard on the pen like you can with the ballpoint, and there's just no penalty for kind of these kind of, heavy-handed, for lack of a better word, crampy writing practices. Maybe it does. Maybe
I'm a very heavy-handed writer.
Are you?
I just because I hate. I mean, yeah, it's because I don't like because I had to use ballpoint pens for so long until the gels came around. But I still write too hard with a gel. I don't mean to, but
right.
Yeah, that's always the paper crinkles and you can feel the back when I'm done with it.
Nice. That's there's a certain something to that. You've really written it if you can read it off the back with your eyes closed.
My one complaint with fountain pens is not with the pens, it's the paper. Paper is so generally hit or miss.
Yeah, right?
With how it takes fountain ink and the whole nib thing and whether it scratches through or gets fuzzy. It can be fun though, like anything else. Have you ever used a Pilot Varsity, the disposable with the big old reservoir? I refilled one once by pulling the nib off, and it doesn't leak or anything. Because they hold a lot. Those are pretty good for, fountain pen that's like $3. They come in a bunch of colors, too.
That wraps it up for this week's Hackaday podcast. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to follow the links, head on over to hackaday.com/podcast. And if you see anything cool or do anything cool, shoot us a line, tips@hackaday.com. And until next week,
keep on hacking. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Just, the two things. Throw in some garlic bread and something's gonna get burned, probably. But is it my turn?
Why do people have names I can't pronounce?
Why can't they just come up with names like Bloop Museum or Handy Bear?
Don't worry if you're Rocky Bogart. If you're Rocky
Dancing Raisins.
Done and done.
Boom.
And now I need to refill my fountain pens.
Me too.